Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone. Powered by Pivotal Moments. I'm your host, Jenn Sherman, and this is I always say every episode's a special episode, but this one's extra special because we have another Pivotal Moments media host and show host of her journey. We have Sandy Lutton. Congratulations on your soon-to-be or launch show.
Thank you. Well, we haven't formally launched, but it's coming.
It's coming.
Soon.
It's coming. Well, maybe by the time this is out, it will be out. Well, welcome, Sandy. This is such a pleasure. I'm so happy that we can, get off of the Zoom room and do this in person,
Yay,
right?
Me too. I'm so excited about this. I woke up this morning and I was like, I'm excited. Like, I'm ready to go do this. Like, in person, this is going to be fun. Have great conversations.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, for me, it was like, the thing about it is, like, I love podcasting. I love having conversations. And before, the pandemic hit, it was such a joy to go into the studio, have something to look forward to, even guests liked it too, because it was a change of scenery from the office.
Right,
and
that's
so
right.
now, speaking of mental fitness and health and wellness, I think to be able to have such dynamic conversations, we need to get back in person.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think, so this is all new for me. So I'm launching a podcast during COVID. So I haven't done the face-to-face. I've been a guest of a podcast prior to this, so this is all still kind of new to me. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. And, it's going to be a good journey. I'm hoping to have more conversations like this with, different, I guess, show host producers from, Pivotal Moments Media. But I think for looking at podcasting as a medium to really tell stories, and, we look back at, heck, I mean, I started We Are Everyone in the blur of when COVID started in April. And, it was one of those things where I didn't even know really what I was talking about. Like, it was funny. You're talking about mental wellness and fitness where it's like, I have a cloud above my head. I mean, I felt like I just had a walking cloud, just like it was following me everywhere I went. But I think coming from that is kind of one of the topics that we want to discuss today is, things are going on around the world constantly.
Right.
The world's moving. Everything's moving right now. But us in this moment, right? And being able to create space for yourself. Some words that have come up a lot lately, particularly with everything that's happened globally, are like empathy and compassion. And I don't think I've really sat with the word compassion before, up until recently, of just what does that mean?
Right.
And how do you kind of show up on a day-to-day basis, but also, show up for yourself. So I'm kind of curious, Sandy, as we had a little pre-interview discussion around this, is, what's your definition of compassion, and, how has that kind of evolved?
So that's something that's interesting because we are taught to be compassionate towards others and give people, to really listen and give people the space to feel the way they feel, and it's our job to better understand that. But we don't look inside and say, okay, am I giving myself the space to feel what I'm feeling right now? And am I really taking the time to think about what I'm going through, why I'm going through it? Ask yourself that question, like, why do I feel this way right now? So compassion for me, I'm learning, is we do have to show compassion for ourselves. And I really have to stop when I'm in that moment, especially when, like you said earlier, like you get anxious and you're just like, what? There's so much going on. And, you start to tell yourself, I need to do this, I need to do this. But sometimes you just need to stop and really feel it and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way right now? What are the reasons? Is it fear? Is it I'm tired? Or what is it? And giving yourself the space and just saying it's okay to feel the way you feel and to really take that time and get in your own head and understand why you're feeling that way. And I think that's so important. We don't give ourselves that break. We're tougher on ourselves than anyone will ever be on us, right? So it's giving ourselves that like, I just need to take a step away for a minute.
Yeah, and I think, when I was, this was when I was back at agency days, one of my managers told another person who she managed saying, like, you're your worst enemy, or like, you're your biggest roadblock. And at first I was like, that's a statement to make, like, to
Right.
someone, it's kind of, but essentially as I've kind of gotten, a little wiser in my, wiser and have more perspective. I mean, it is true in a sense, because if you keep on getting your own way, and there's things that you can do to make your day or life easier, that's in your control. And, when I think about when things happen, I like to reframe stuff when I work with my spiritual guide who's been on We Are Everyone, Jared, is like, think about why are things happening for you and rather than to you. Right. And so when you're going through these times, we're speaking about someone who has anxiety or talking to people who have depression. It's like, why is this happening for you? So like, what is the universe or kind of life putting on your table for you to get through? So then truly you can be then compassionate to others based on what you are going through. And I think like that reframe is really helpful when you wake up in the day and you're like yesterday, I was like, it's Rosh Hashanah. I'm tired. And I canceled I canceled essentially everything except for one call because I needed to just be in my space. And sure, was it last minute? Yeah, but that's also okay, And I think having, to your point, like that space for yourself and understanding that self-talk, because a lot of the time I at least feel, for me, is that I'll go and then call a friend or talk to someone about it. Well, I personally think sometimes it's more important to have self-talk with yourself, like, because then, you're the only one feeling that.
That's
right?
true. And I think I do think it's important that you talk to other people sometimes because it's good to get a different perspective.
Yeah.
But if you don't take the time to talk to yourself, how do you get your own perspective and start to really form that? And you talked about the reframing. I have the tendency to say, oh, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. And my life coach said to me, she goes, what if you just said, I get to do this and I get to do that. And all of a sudden it's an opportunity versus a duty or something you have to do or have to check off your to-do list. And it's having that gratitude for all those things you have in your life and being able to embrace that, and as opposed to dreading it because it's one more thing you have to do. So I think that's important. That reframing is such a huge piece of it too.
Yeah, and then feeling like when you wake up during your day, like I was like, today's manageable. Like it's a manageable day. I could breeze through things well. Like I need to get back to the mindset. It's like every day's a spa day, right? But then something happens, right? Like then something will happen where we'll like punt it off. So my neighbor, yesterday I was like, but the thing about it is yesterday my mindset was already Jen needed a break. Anything, could have been anything that set it off. I play music every morning at like 7 a.m.
I love it.
I don't know if my neighbor doesn't like it.
Right.
And so I think it was a buildup of the situation of like probably, my boyfriend was like, Jen, that was not, that was a buildup. That wasn't just an instant thing. I was like, true. But my whole thing is like, then, the banging of like whatever, it's like, then you take on that, she came by and like was knocking on the door and it's like, no, but then that like diverted my day a little, it's like, that was my joy, then diverted the day. Mm-hmm. But then I'm like, put myself in her shoes. She's probably pissed off already. Right. And like, how can you get back into, how can you not let like instances that are coming at you and like during your day or whatever to not like just completely offset you or be in that moment? Because I think that's another thing as well, is you can wake up wanting to send all this gratitude of what I get to do. But then when you're on a call and they're talking over and you need to get to the next call and you're blah, 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 I'm not really in a gratitude mood anymore. Right. I'm just annoyed. Right.
Well, it's the derailers.
Yeah.
Right? These things happen all the time. You're in one space and something comes along and completely derails how you're feeling, or it derails your schedule or whatever. And I think one of the things that it goes back to, now I'm annoyed, now I'm frustrated, and asking the question, why? Why am I annoyed right now? Why am I frustrated? How can I, and it goes back to talking to yourself. I think that's when it's more important to talk to yourself. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I've had this derailing. Okay, my schedule's thrown off, the day is thrown off, but how can I regroup and get myself back? And that's just like taking that time to think and understand like what you're feeling, why you're feeling it. Some people call it all your different parts. All your different parts come to the table and you're like, okay, they're all at this frustrated part is here at the table. Let's talk to that part. Let's find out why it's feeling. I know that sounds strange, but if you do it, it actually really works. Like you start to break down and understand. And oftentimes I learn that the thing that derailed me was not at all why I was ultimately frustrated.
Yep.
It's just the thing that kind of set me off.
It's just what set it off. And you know what? Like going back to my neighbor, which maybe I'll get her like cute basket or something, because I just think when I see her, it's like, I know that, it's nothing to do with me, but it's probably, she probably didn't get good sleep or just something, I derailed her as much as she derailed me. And, I'll sit with that before I don't, that day I was like, I didn't want to deal with Dora, but I was already really annoyed because of how emotionally exhausted I was from this past 2 weeks.
Right.
So, I think it's like sitting with those feelings, because that's where I think a lot of the time we talk about mental health. Like, I think it was easier sometimes for me when I was going through those times to just breeze through and not face what was actually going on. But then once I started doing the life work of working with my spiritual guide and then running a business, I was like, this is exhausting. This is when sometimes like I get like, life happens and it can be a lot, but it's a matter of like being very intentional and like compassionate, because then if you sit in that soul, if I sat all day with that situation, I mean, for what?
Right.
Like,
what good does that do you?
What good does that do?
It goes back to that narrative. What are you telling yourself? And if you're telling yourself, I'm going to have a bad day, it's just going to be a bad day, then guess what? You're going to have a bad day. But you can take that time and try to get yourself out of it. And if you can't do it on your own, that's when you pick up the phone and call someone, right?
Exactly. Like you need that kind of juju or whatever.
Yes.
And I always say like Mondays, I could always use an extra day. My Mondays are just like, I could always use an extra day. And I know people are like, well, even my spiritual guy's like, well, is it, you say it's Monday. I was like, yeah, but Jared, like, it's just naturally me coming off 2 days not working to working. It's like, I could just use like maybe like a weekend half on a Monday, you know? And that's just the day it falls. Okay. So it's like, I get it. Like you could expect your mindset, but I just know myself and my mood, and my Mondays are just a little harder than Tuesdays,
I get that.
And
I can relate to that.
And that's okay. But it's like, when my thing is like, listen, like I'm all for like good attitude, waking up as like a spa day, but it's also okay for things to excuse my language, like to feel shitty. Like that's also okay. And to sit in those feelings, right? Like that's where I think sometimes where people put these expectations on you, particularly around self-work and therapy, or all these things, is that okay, you went to therapy, you're okay. No, that's not necessarily the case. Like like you don't. And I think one of some shows I watched too, where this one teenager, she, like the family, it was really interesting because it showcased reasons why she went to substances. And it was like when her family wasn't like around for her, or she just felt like she was like a family of one. And so she turned to things to escape. And so then when she got back from rehab, her family just assumed, oh, she went to rehab, she's okay. Well, what got her in rehab to start with?
Right.
Like,
what was she dealing with?
Exactly. And I think we have to be more compassionate towards other people's shoes, because we might not have that same type of perspective.
Right.
But so.
Well, you just mentioned something I think that's so interesting too, because I think there is that sense of, especially when you're at work and in an office, right? And there's that need to perform. I've got to perform. There's a certain expectation here. And you're right. It's not realistic to be happy and smiley and everything is good. And so why do we try to do that? Why not just give ourselves that opportunity to feel it and be real and authentic? Because that is who we are. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. We're going to be happy. We're going to be sad. We're going to go through all those things. So why not just go through it? And I think, so when I think about the Her Journey Told, I think that's why it's so important. And the new podcast that we're going to have on Pivotal Moments is really being able to share the stories of those women. And we hear oftentimes the success story, like, well, look at the incredible thing this person did, or look what they went through. But do we really get down to what were the obstacles that you faced? And what was the pain? And how did you get through it? And how did you show up on the days that you didn't want to? And I think that's where we really learn from one another and sharing each other's stories and understanding, like, what did it feel like to be in those highs and when you hit those milestones? Or what did it feel like when you didn't? And what held you back? And what helped you to move forward and press in and keep going? And I think that's so important to be able to share those things. But again, it's about being authentic and feeling what you're feeling and just going through it. That's what helps us to grow.
Yep.
Putting on that, as I call it, the performance face, that doesn't really help us grow.
No, it's not. And I think to your point of like those moments of, that's where, I, with my parents or even not my mom more so than my dad's like, don't put out your dirty laundry. I'm like, here is all my dirty laundry, like here, right. I don't even call it dirty. I call it life. Like, it's like, this is what happened to, this is what I've gone through. This is what I experienced. Like, it's okay. It's okay to have darker, I would say dark, I follow the word darker paths and like darker periods of life. They bring you to light, but you have to know that there's light at the other side of the tunnel where it's like, you can, this whole thing of like success. I mean, I like the word success, but I also hate the word success because the word success means that like there's failure and success where like you look at people, you're born, the only time I feel like in this world, as I just had a nephew, is where you don't have any expectations around yourself is literally probably I don't even know, maybe in the first week or 2 weeks of life, because then you have milestones you have to hit.
Absolutely.
Oh, did your kid not start walking yet? Not potty trained? How about talking? Oh, you're a little delayed and
yes.
like talking, like, come on, like everyone, like that's the part of these expectations that are put onto people where sometimes like they are unrealistic. And also like going back to your journey, like, is that your journey? Like maybe the kid who didn't speak for 5 years because they weren't cognitively developed there yet or ready, is they were mastering a whole other skill of listening.
Absolutely.
Yes,
it's like, I love that.
It's like the way we kind of look at things of this spectrum of, I don't like normalcy because I was talking to this other woman today, like neurotypical. That's a better word than normalcy because what is normal,
Right.
Like,
well, and it's all normal is what we create here, right? Is what we deem as normal. But my normal is not going to be your normal, right? We live completely different lives.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, there's kind of these societal structures that are in place that are telling us this is what you have to be. I mean, what's the first thing you ask? I mean, when you were growing up, I don't hear it as much anymore because I think people are more aware. But what do you ask a child when you first meet them? What do you want to be when you grow up? What are you doing in school? How's school? What's your favorite subject? And all of a sudden they're like deer in the headlights and they're like, I don't know. I remember my son in first grade, he's like, I want to be an ice cream truck driver. And I'm like, yes. I mean, like, whatever, right?
Exactly. It's like, and the difference is we're getting past the generation of where my mom's dad said you can only be a doctor or a lawyer. She's like, well, I don't like blood. I guess I'll choose being a doctor. And so when she found her, calling much later in life, which was fine. She found it, not a big deal. But it's like, I was never the person who played the sports. I never got the awards. I never, but I kind of went against the status quo of things that were deemed as successful or the A student. I still have triggers that, my mom called my brother the A student and me the B student. And I'm like,
yes.
and I'm like, that's where but the other side of it is not to, to give no grades. We have to find a happy medium of discipline, but also leaning into people, which I think Gen Z is doing better, is accepting people from more of all walks of life and identities versus for, that's where I think we're trying to go.
Right.
But at the same time, that puts on a whole other onset of, mental, kind of the mindset too. Like it's not, I personally think what we should really be teaching kids at the younger age are like these life skills of perspective, attitude, compassion, because that I didn't learn the word perspective until I was, in my mid-20s.
Right.
I mean, like or compassion, right? Like you're supposed to share, but maybe not. Maybe you don't want to share. Maybe you're like, this is my lunch. Okay. Like,
Right.
you know,
Exactly. It's like Chinese food. Everybody
Yeah.
says, oh, let's all order a bunch of
Yeah.
share. I'm like, no, I really don't want to do that. I
Yeah.
just want to eat what I want to eat.
Yeah, I was like, I always remember I used to always get my own dessert, okay?
Right.
Because the thought about, even these days with the pandemic, sharing desserts is kind of gross. I don't want people, just give me my own dessert,
Right.
okay? Like, and that was me when I was little. Then I was told I needed to share dessert. Well, maybe I still just want my own dessert. And that's okay.
Right.
You know, it's not rude.
Right.
Like,
So it's funny that you say that because my son, everyone asked him, when you talk about, you didn't play sports and all that stuff. So my daughter plays sports, my other son plays sports. And so when they get to Luke, they say, so Luke, what sport do you play? And he kind of gives them a face like, I don't play sports. It's not my thing, and I love that about him. And he's so okay with it. And he's just like, no, they're like, well, what do you like? He goes, I like different things. He goes, right now I like playing video games, or right now I like doing Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts. And for him, it just changes. And I feel like he's in this mode of exploring life, and he's so okay with it. That's the beauty of it.
And he's okay with it,
okay
which
with
feels
it.
great, rather than the loom
Right.
and gloom of, I played clarinet, didn't like it. Then I played piano, didn't like it. Then I, ran, that's okay that I was exploring those
You got to
things.
explore
But,
and
yeah.
find yourself. And I think that's part of showing compassion for yourself, is allowing yourself to explore different things. You're going to succeed at some, you're going to fail at others, but in that, ultimately, you're going to find what brings you joy and what makes you happy. And it's your own path. And I just think there's something that's so special about carving out your own path. And that's, again, going back to the podcast, like, that's what I want to share
With her journey,
with her journey. I want people to be able to share that and be okay with your own journey. And we all have our own journey. And I think it's so important that we share, but also that we teach each other that exploring different avenues of life is so important.
It's so important. And like also being able to have the journey. Because I mean, if I think about childhood and all this stuff, I was like, I didn't like my childhood at all. I didn't feel like, whatever path I was constructing, I didn't feel like accepted. It just didn't feel good. Nothing felt good. It more felt like, the kid who didn't get the reward because I didn't do something for 10 years. I just was like,
right.
But then it's kind of like, what I wish now is that during those child rearing years, that parents and people around, it's like, that's okay,
Right.
like rather than
Right.
making but also instilling that confidence at a younger age. I mean, I'm hearing adolescents talk now, and like, hold up, they're so emotionally mature. I mean, I know they're probably, maybe this is through a Netflix show where they're literally like 25 and they're acting like they're 16, so it's different. But still, like, I think to your point of like, everyone's journey is different, and you and I can sit in a room and talk about our experiences, but like also know that no experience is the same.
Right.
And just being able to having that confidence and belief and like in compassion for yourself, then all the other things surrounding you you can then send more gratitude and stuff to others versus resentment of, am I not here yet? Because if you look at traditional kind of family or traditional whatever path
Right.
versus like yours, it's like, that person was made for the traditional path. That's what they wanted, but you don't, that's not necessarily yours. And raising kids, I'm sure it's so interesting to see.
They're all unique.
Yeah.
They're all unique. I mean, there's a lot of similarities because I have twins. So I always get asked, like, do they have the typical twin things? And in some ways they do, but in some ways they are so different. Personalities, all three kids, very different personalities. And that's good. That's totally okay. And it's fun. It keeps things exciting, right? It's not a boring moment ever. But I think that is something that, again, we learn from each other. And I actually love hanging out with people that are very different from me.
Oh yeah, me too.
Because it's just so, again, you're learning in that process, and you're exploring, and your world is expanding in that way. And I think the more we do that, at least it's been my experience, the more I look at myself and go, it's okay. It's okay to be different. I as a child growing up, and then even through my 20s and 30s, it was all about Am I accepted? Do people like me? And I have a big issue with that. Like, I want people to like me. I don't like rejection. I don't like, or thinking that I've hurt someone's feelings or something like that. But I heard someone give the definition of freedom one time, and it was a pivotal moment for me. I mean, it was the definition of freedom is when you allow someone the opportunity to misunderstand you. And I was like, wow, that is so huge, because if I'm just living up to their perspective or their expectations, they're never having the opportunity to see the unique me and misunderstanding me. If they're always on the same page with me, there's something wrong with that, right? And so I think that's so important. And that's been a big life lesson for me is I need to say what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, and stop being in your head, someone else's head, and saying, okay, here's what I think, here's what I feel, and this is important to me. Not to say that I'm dismissive of how you feel, but I want to give you that opportunity as well. But if I just go along and agree with everything you say, I'm not giving you that opportunity. I'm not giving myself that opportunity to misunderstand. So I think that's so important.
Frankly, I love that. And I think that could be even like a really good theme for her journey of like talking about freedom. Like freedom is a huge aspect, because also understanding that, you have the freedom to also like, you can say or do whatever you want, right? Having said that, also when you're having these conversations, understanding that that person you're sitting, this is not like who's better than or whatever. Everyone's on their own journey, but you might have these conversations with people and feel liberated. That other person might not be where you are. They might haven't done that work or have had that revelation. So when something happens with another person or there is a misunderstanding or what have you, it's just because they're not in that same plane. So when you offending someone, you don't even realize you're offending someone, because that could be something that is a trigger for them that you have no idea.
Absolutely.
So the more we can just communicate, the more that we have compassion, the more that we can sit in a room, with like people from all walks of life and have conversations. Like I want to talk to, if someone has a completely different religious belief or political belief, let's just talk about it. That's their personal freedom to talk about it,
Yes.
And they grew up in probably a different scenario where that was what they grew up believing.
Right.
But dismissing other people all the time is where, we're not really being then true, authentic to ourselves if like we're just going to go around and dismiss everything just because it's not what holds true to ourselves. And the more we can have these types of conversations, more we can have conversations like, on her journey and, just kind of wrapping up some of our conversation, and we should just come back on each other's shows. This is always so fun. But what kind of people, when you are gathering guests or kind of thinking about, what kind of guests you want to have on her journey, what is that kind of, I guess, I would really say like characteristics in the sense of like what they kind of carry. Because like for me, I would want to have someone who is like an open, honest, kind of can hold that space for others versus closed off, right?
Yes.
And so I'm just curious, what kind of people do you have on the show?
So I believe everyone has a story. So I try not to define it too closely, but I do think it's important that we are looking at multi-generational and that we are getting all those different perspectives as well as, global and bringing in different cultures and trying to better understand what the journey looks like. And someone who grew up in Afghanistan versus growing up here, right? I mean, just a completely different definition of what freedom would be if you really went to explore that topic. I think it's someone who's willing to share, but they are sharing under the intention of wanting to help others learn. So if I'm sharing what's going on in my life or what my journeys look like and what I've learned along the way and where I failed and where, what societal norms that I've had to fight against and overcome, and what's that internal narrative I'm telling myself. I want someone who comes on the show who's willing to share and wanting to help others learn from that, and having the audience walk away with, oh, wow, those are some great tidbits. Now I know that when I face something like that, I've got some examples of what I can use. Sometimes when we talk about mental fitness and what makes us more mentally fit, and we all have our own routine of things that we do, but it's really in those moments where it's the hardest and the most challenging, that a lot of those things can go out the door. If I'm not feeling like getting up in the morning and going through my devotionals or writing in my journal, and I'm having, like just not feeling it, that's when I need to be able to look to something else. Maybe that's when I go take a walk instead or do something different. So I think, that's why I say everyone has a story, but I think it's so important that we talk about those times of struggle, but what's the wisdom we've all learned from that in the end?
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. During those times of struggle was not when I was like journaling every day or on the bike. Like I was like probably just on autopilot mode trying to divert my feelings. But then it's like, okay, now this next time that you're going through a challenge, you can sit with those feelings and, knowing that I do need to get on the bike. But some days I'm so emotionally exhausted, I don't want to get on the bike. And that's okay.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be so routine. And I think those are going to be some really awesome stories that you'll, to tell, because I think a lot of times you go through life and you have conversations, you take the things you want to hear and then, kind of like compartmentalize or just, don't, you just have to, what one person says of what their experience is. And there's so many different forms of meditation. I think it's more so like meditate. It's like, honey bunny, like maybe my meditation's my bike. It's not just sitting with myself. Maybe some days I want to do that.
Right.
But not every day, and I think that's going to be fun. I'm really excited for your show.
Yeah. It's, some of the interviews we've already done have really been about that person who, kind of went down one career path, and then totally pivoted and made that change. But it came down to how was she being true to herself and really following her passion? Another one was about a panel of wellness entrepreneurs and what made them decide to leave the practices they were working for and actually start their own practice. And what was that thought process? And what were the fears that they faced during that? And how would they encourage others who may be thinking of doing the same thing? One person we'll talk to is an activist and how she's fought for human rights. So, again, it could be anyone. I think there's going to be some really incredible fun stories that come out of this, but also some really powerful wisdom as well.
I love that. Yeah. Well, we're going to obviously blast that out. And then on the umbrella of We Are Everyone, we just we take all walks of life and just make it all come together. Because I just think at the end of the day, like if we don't talk to everyone, then we don't how are we supposed to even really make an impact on this earth?
That's right. Absolutely.
So, well, this has been amazing, Sandy.
It's been fun.
I know you and I could go for hours, but I think I don't think the attention span is the right word, but people's kind of taste for, they want to probably move it on to another podcast now. But it's been such a pleasure. We have Sandy Lutton. She is the podcast host of Her Journey, which is also under Pivotal Moments Media. And I'm Jenn Sherman, the host of We Are Everyone. And stay tuned for more in-person interviews, because I think we're a little sick and tired sometimes of that Zoom room. Am I right?
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. No shade to Zoom. I still use you. That's not an ad. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will catch you next time. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.